Oh, yeah, he's unique. He is absolutely unique.
He was a genius.
Unparalleled.
The Concerto in A for clarinet was written by Mozart in Vienna in October 1791. It proved to be one of his last compositions. In Salzburg, 35 years and over 600 works earlier, Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgang Gottlieb Mozart was born. Wolfgang was the seventh child, though only the second to survive, of Leopold Mozart, one of Europe's finest violinists and composers, and his wife, Anna Maria.
The conditions in those days, an open fireplace, and you can imagine the work of Mozart's mother, full day business. She was the first to get up to heat, otherwise nothing warm. She had to carry everything up and down, and the water she normally brought from the main fountain in town. There was no water inside houses, there were no toilets, no bathrooms, nothing in those days. This was the living room of the family, and Leopold Mozart, he was an excellent composer of the pre-classic music period.
Leopold Mozart had a job as Kapellmeister at the court in Salzburg, and his responsibilities really were for organising the musicians, composing, arranging music, very much a kind of administrative functionary job. It was one that he resented greatly.
Salzburg was ideally situated culturally by being directly on the route between the north and Italy. All the archbishops of Salzburg had studied in Rome, and they brought back with them very modern Italian culture. So the music that Mozart would have heard when he was a child in Salzburg was pretty up to date.
Mozart never attended school. He was taught everything he knew by his father, above all, music. His elder sister, Nannerl, was also talented, but it was clear the boy was exceptional.
So it's andante, and what is interesting about it is this sudden change of rhythm from 3 into, and this. I think for somebody who is 5 years old and 3 months, this is quite a highly developed composition.
A 5-year-old shouldn't have been able to play what Mozart plays. The bones in a child's hand actually remain quite separated, so that the muscles and tendons are really not fully functional in an adult sense until the child is 10 or 11. Mozart's ability to play the keyboard, as well as anybody else, was physiologically astounding.
Yeah, this probably also created the idea in Leopold's head to start what seems to be unbelievable for us. In our days, no one would go on a journey without booking ahead. He did. The whole family left.
When he realized he had a child prodigy and an elder sister who wasn't that bad either, he thought he could show them off.
He felt he has a sacred duty, a duty to God, as he saw it, to show his amazing son to the world. It was nice if he could make some money while doing it, of course.
Leopold and Anna Maria spent the next 3 years taking their children from palace to palace, court to court, through 75 towns in 8 countries.
Most of Central Europe was made up of a whole multitude of little tiny weeny states. With all of these little states, there's a great deal of musical activity because each prince, each city wants to have its own cultural life and cultural activity. So there are many opportunities.
Our concert went off splendidly. Wolfgang is extraordinarily jolly, but a bit of a scamp as well. Princess Amalia, sister of the King of Prussia, was there. If the kisses which she gave to my children, Wolfgang especially, had been new gold coins, we should be quite happy. But neither the innkeeper nor the postmaster are paid in kisses.
The Correspondance Littéraire, 11th of December 1763. A Kapellmeister of Salzburg named Mozart has just arrived here with 2 children. His daughter, 11 years of age, and her brother, soon 7 years old, who is extraordinary and writes and composes with wonderful ease.
Wolfgang has received a gold snuff box and a gold watch, a travelling writing case in silver, and a host of trifles which I do not value very highly.
You have to remember, there's no televisions, no radio, no CDs, no anything. So if you are a royal personage and you look to evening entertainment, one of your likeliest sources of entertainment, some would be theatre, some might be music, and you'd have your own little band to come and play to you. And when distinguished visitors came to the country, you could expect to invite them to perform before you.
The Avant-Coureur, Paris, 5th of March 1764. Not only does he perform in a surprising manner the concertos by the most celebrated European masters, but he composes himself.
Voor een 8-jarige is het wel heel bijzonder. Daar heb ik helemaal in gestudeerd, in geprent, in geleerd door zijn vader.
Dear friend, thank God we have safely crossed the English Channel. Yet we have not done so without making a heavy contribution in vomit. In London, everyone seems to me to be in fancy dress, and you cannot imagine what my wife and my little girl look like in English hats, and I and our big Wolfgang in English clothes.
Leopold Mozart, muss seine Familie bei den jeweiligen Höfen immer wieder neu einkleiden. Wir wissen aus den Briefen, dass er, wenn er nach England fährt, nicht in der Kleidung eines Deutschen oder eines Franzosen reisen kann, sonst wird er angegriffen.
The cost of taking a family all across Europe, paying for accommodations every single night, paying for musical instruments, is staggering.
Leopold Mozart was always complaining about being fobbed off with yet another snuff box instead of a fat fee. But of course, for the boy, the real value was meeting his peers.
On these journeys, Mozart met a great many other musicians and heard a great deal of other music. The musical experiences he picked up were enormously varied, and they do echo in his own music. I rather think that the reason that Mozart became such a universal composer was that he had this big range of experience. No other composer did this. All the different experiences were absorbed into his own musical personality.
He was able to absorb things with amazing facility, but he turned it into Mozart.
He had this little notebook where whenever he had a musical idea, he wrote it down. So it was a sort of composer's exercise book. Now, it sounds like a very simple minuetto, but if you look actually at the second half, it clearly shows already Mozart's genius compared to other composers. Any other composer, well, especially an 8-year-old, but even older composers, probably would have written something like this. Nice and beautifully 4-bar phrases. Now, what Mozart does is, and he suddenly includes these 2 bars, which immediately takes it out of the ordinary and makes it a little jewel, a gem. It's something Haydn himself would have done probably at the age of 60, 70. And here's Mozart, 8 years old.
Diary of Lorenz Hübner, 29th of November, 1766. From Holland they went to Switzerland, then to Augsburg, Bavaria, and so on, until at last they once again arrived back at Salzburg, in good health. The boy is now almost 10 years of age. There's a strong rumor that the Mozart family will not long remain here.
Salzburg ist eine Kleinstadt gewesen mit dem ganzen Mief und Spießbürgerlichkeit und kleinstädtischem Tratsch. Denn die hatten sich inzwischen an ein großes Leben gewöhnt. Sie waren von Königen und Fürsten empfangen worden, hatten an deren Tafel gegessen. Und sie waren einfach andere, als sie zurückkamen.
Vienna seemed the next step. It was the imperial capital. It was the center of the political and social and cultural environment.
The Austrian empress was Maria Theresia. She ruled with the help of her son, Emperor Joseph II.
The emperor asked the boy twice whether he would like to compose an opera and conduct it himself. Wolfgang said yes. Can you imagine what a turmoil secretly arose? A boy of 12 seated at the harpsichord and conducting his own opera?
Vienna's local composers were appalled at a 12-year-old securing one of their commissions, and they conspired to ensure the opera was not performed. Rebuked, the Mozarts returned home to Salzburg. Leopold now focused all his energies on his son. Nannerl remained in Salzburg, while Wolfgang travelled with his father back and forth to Italy.
K74, I would have been thrilled if I could write it myself now. It's wonderfully talented music making. It is still formulaic music, remarkable to be written by somebody that age.
It's during the trip to Italy that Mozart starts writing letters. I think the character of the boy that comes through is clearly one of high spirits, sense of humor, very lively, a young teenager.
Dearest Mamma, it is so jolly on this journey. Our coachman is a fine fellow who, when the road gives him the slightest chance, drives so fast.
He was just having a great time with his dad. His obvious intense interest would have made all of these opportunities to go to churches and hear masses, to go to the opera in various places, terribly, terribly exciting for him.
The opera at Mantua was charming. The prima donna sings well, but very softly. She cannot open her mouth, but whines out everything.
Dear wife, praise be to God, we are both well. You know how Wolfgang controls himself. Whatever does not seem right to him, he leaves, and often he eats very little. Yet nonetheless, he is fat and cheerful. Wolfgang had to compose a string quartet for the concert held yesterday. Over 150 members of the leading nobility were present. You have often heard of the famous Miserere. It is so greatly prized that the performers in the Sistine Chapel are forbidden on pain of excommunication to copy it. But we have it already. Wolfgang has written it down.
Mozart must have had a most wonderful ear. Write it all down on a piece of manuscript paper as though it was being printed by a photocopier or a computer of some sort.
Travelling through Italy, Mozart also learned Italian, which was the international language of opera.
Mozart est pour la première fois confronté à un monde d'opéra italien, c'est-à-dire qu'il est confronté à des chanteurs. Par exemple, il va écouter l'Armida Abbandonata de Jomelli à Naples. Il réutilise en fait beaucoup d'éléments qu'il a entendus dans le Jomelli, dans l'Armida Abbandonata. Donc Mozart a cette faculté d'absorber, c'est vraiment comme une éponge.
Il sogno di Leopold Mozart in realtà era quello di sistemare il figlio in Italia, di sistemarlo presso qualche corte. Tentò a Milano, tentò a Firenze, ma invano perché i posti o erano già occupati o i rispettivi sovrani non intendevano assumere un compositore così giovane. Il ragazzo aveva 13-14 anni. Comunque Mozart tornò a Salisburgo con 3 importanti committenze operistiche, 3 opere che rappresentò a Milano rispettivamente il Mitridate, l'Ascanio in Alba e il Lucio Silla.
Mozart to his sister. I cannot write much because my fingers ache so much from composing.
Tu
Es ist sicher so, dass diese Werke vielleicht nicht so reif sind wie die späteren Werke von Mozart, aber es ist andererseits auch sicher so, dass diese Werke viel schöner und reicher und überzeugender wirken als die anderen Oper von erwachsenen Komponisten seiner Zeit.
In March 1773, the Mozarts, using income earned in Italy, moved into a fine new Salzburg apartment.
It must have been a wonderful feeling getting out of that tenement flat, that small, dark place, where no doubt if his mother wanted a piece of cheese or an egg or something, Wolfgang would have to stop writing a sonata and nip down all those stone stairs, and moving across the river to where there was cleaner air and much more space, much more light, must have been a terrific relief. The rooms were bigger, the light was greater, it was altogether posher.
A new ruler of Salzburg had been elected, the Archbishop Hieronymus Count Colloredo. At the start of his reign, he gave Mozart a position in the court orchestra. His responsibilities were to perform when asked and to compose.
Frankly, Mozart was not a particularly good employee. Maybe we think he deserves not to have been a good employee because he was such a genius. But the fact of the matter is that even though he turned out a lot of music, he wrote very little music for the court. All of those symphonies that he composed in the 1770s were probably for friends or for private concerts.
Mozart, by his late teens, he was master of every going technique, every branch of sort of musical expertise that was going, every cliche, if you like, that was popular. And he was diligently assembling these in these extremely accomplished pieces.
It's fascinating to think of Mozart in Salzburg. It's a very small town at that time. These people weren't even Austrians, they were Salzburgers. You had to get a passport to go to Vienna. This is a walled town with very many people inside it, very busy, very dirty. The streets absolutely filthy most of the time. It rains a lot, you know, they call it the piss pot of Europe.
In a sense, the true Mozart breaks through rather late because he had this huge expertise. I mean, he'd composed full-length operas, he'd composed 28 symphonies and so on by the age of 18. But the first symphony today that we still really acknowledge as the true Mozart would be the A Major Symphony number 29, written at 18.
He was mature. He was mature from a very young age, I think. I have a theory that he's someone who lived faster than other people. When I'm trying to sort of see his life like as a film, I always see it in like an accelerated movie.
What distinguishes this music from other similar music of the time and the place is the really spectacular sense of energy that there is to it. It's not the least bit staid. I think we're dealing with a remarkable firecracker.
216 has an incredible amount of depth, and for me even, it reveals that he was very alive. He must have been crazy to some extent, so joyful. This man must have felt happiness very strongly and had a great talent to put it in music. Of course, he must have been a fabulous violinist. It lies very well on the instrument, but still, it's bloody hard.
Actually, such a pure music, and it goes just straight to the heart, and it's very, yeah, in a way joyful, but it's also very, very deep.
There is an incredible sensitivity and romance and sadness. There is so much sadness in the music.
I mean, how can a person compose this divine music? And I mean, he wrote so many beautiful pieces and at incredible young age, and it's just amazing.
Salzburg felt stifling and without prospects. But Mozart was in the employ of the Archbishop. All he could do was hope for the best, and meanwhile, continue to write.
If I were to pick one piece that I think is the first truly great Mozart piece, it would be the Piano Concerto in E-flat.
The piano is suddenly there immediately with a cheeky response. Again, the orchestra is saying, "Shut up, it's our turn." And the piano again says...
To have the courage to... The piano entering on the second bar, so not waiting the whole introduction of or exposition of orchestra. I mean, what a surprise. Now it feels natural and normal, but to do it for the first time, that's amazing.
The piano comes in with a long trill and sits there like this for ages. Now, not to be forgotten that this was a very high part of the Mozart piano. The Mozart piano ended here. So this would have been right up next door to the wood. And then it goes right up to the top of the piano. Mozart was working within the structures of the 18th century. He didn't half turn them around. And quite often things were happening when one wouldn't expect them to happen. And the last movement.
He's taking the conventions, but slightly rearranging them to produce an effect of surprise. But he's not rearranging them to such an extreme extent that he loses contact with his audience. And this is really absolutely of the essence of Mozart.
The origins of prodigious greatness and greatness on the scale that Mozart achieved is extremely rare. I suppose the only comparable figure in literature is William Shakespeare. It's extremely rare on that scale. It's very often associated with all sorts of psychological disabilities, which Mozart did not seem to display. He is not like someone with Asperger's. He's not an autist. He's not an isolated prodigy. His prodigiousness seems to be associated with a perfectly normal psychological existence.
In September 1777, Archbishop Colloredo finally gave Mozart permission to leave Salzburg and seek illustrious commissions elsewhere.
But he'd never been away from parental care. He'd never had to take decisions for himself. He hadn't learned much about the handling of money. And Leopold felt that this would put too much responsibility on him if he were allowed to travel by himself. Just making the arrangements, he felt that Wolfgang needed something of a minder. So his mother went with him.
Don't worry, my darling husband. Everything will come right in the end. I wish you good night, my dear. But first, shit in your bed and make it burst.
Wir müssen aber auch sehen, dass wir heutige tabuisierte Grenzen damals nicht haben. Und dazu gehört nicht nur innerhalb der Familie, sondern auch viel allgemeiner der Umgang mit Sexualität, mit körperlichen Vorgängen.
Dearest cousin, do you still love me? I'm sure you do. Well, I wish you good night, but first shit in your bed and make it burst. My arse is burning like fire. What on earth does it mean? Ye gods, can I believe those ears of mine? Yes, indeed, it is so. What a long, melancholy note. Mamma said to me, I bet you let one off. I don't think so, Mamma, I replied. Well, I'm certain that you have, she insisted. Well, I thought, let's see. Put my finger to my arse and then to my nose, and Mama was right.
It's clear from reading other family letters that both Mozart's father and mother were given to making exactly the same kinds of comments to each other. It's really quite unfair of historians or biographers or anyone to take a correspondence of 9 months when a boy is 21 years old and not terribly mature and make it symptomatic of the man as a whole.
I mean, most of us grow up thinking about kakas and pee-pees and wee-wees and farts and so forth, and in normal families that's a very substantial part of the discourse. And it doesn't mean they're dirty-minded. What it means is that they are coming to terms with the fact that we are these vessels of food and feces. And what's odd about that? And somehow the assumption is that if you're a genius, you should rise above it. Well, that's again a sort of blind-born view of things. I don't want to know about that. My wife and I were absolutely appalled to hear that Mozart talked like that. I hope he didn't talk like that at home.
Thank God we both arrived safe and sound in Mannheim. If we decide to stay on for a good while, we shall go to some private house, for staying in inns is far too expensive.
He was really busy in finding a job. He was contacting a lot of people, but he wasn't successful. On the one hand, there was this famous orchestra here, and on the other hand, 90 musicians. This was the size of the orchestra in Mannheim. That was enough for the Prince Elector.
You have now been away 8 weeks, that is, 2 months, and have reached Mannheim. How amazingly quick. If you want to make a stay, you ought to do so in a large town where there is society and where merit has hopes and opportunities of being rewarded. And where is there such a place? Paris.
Mannheim, 17th of January 1778. Dear Father, I don't know whether I've already written about Herr Weber's daughter or not. She sings indeed most admirably and has a lovely pure voice. She's only 16.
Mozart fell in love with Aloysia Weber and wrote some pieces for her and concocted plans which his father objected to take her to Italy and make her a famous prima donna.
Where women are concerned, the greatest reserve and prudence are necessary. Whoever does not use his judgment to the utmost to keep the necessary reserve with them will exert it in vain later on when he endeavours to extricate himself from the labyrinth. My dear son, those happy moments are gone when, as child and boy, you never went to bed without standing on a chair and singing to me, and ending by kissing me again and again on the tip of my nose and telling me that when I grow old you would put me in a glass case so that you might always have me with you and honor me. Off with you to Paris, and soon.
Dear husband, the hall and stairs are so narrow that it will be impossible to bring up a clavier. Sir Wolfgang can't compose at home. I never see him all day long, and shall forget altogether how to talk.
You say that I ought to pay a good many calls in order to make new acquaintances and revive the old ones. That, however, is out of the question. The distances are too great for walking, or the roads too muddy, for really the mud in Paris is beyond all description. People pay plenty of compliments, it's true, but there it ends. They arrange for me to come on such and such a day, I play, and hear them exclaim, "Oh, that's astonishing," and then it is goodbye.
You will have to fight your way through. For heaven's sake, exert yourself.
I often wonder whether life is worth living. I don't find much pleasure in anything.
My dear Wolfgang, perhaps you will realize now the work, the efforts, and the daily worries which I have had to cope with during 30 years of married life.
Monsieur mon très cher père, I hope that you are now prepared to hear with fortitude one of the saddest and most painful stories. At 21 minutes past 10 at night, my mother fell asleep peacefully in the Lord. Remember that Almighty God willed it thus, and how can we rebel against him? She is not lost to us forever. We shall live together far more happily and blissfully than ever in this world.
His mother dies. Now, some people say that while he was composing this sonata K310 that his mother dies. Other people say that he had already written it. To me, it's actually the most dramatic piece he's ever written, especially the middle section where there's a sort of emotional storm raging through the music. Basically all there in the music, and if you just follow the directions you get maybe the state of mind he was in, but whether it was because of his mother died or because he was unhappy for some other reason, that to me doesn't really make much difference.
The letters that Leopold wrote to Mozart after Mozart's mother had died in Paris have usually been taken as the first and most compelling evidence of the breakdown of relationship between father and son. It's clear that Leopold increasingly adopts a strident tone, that he says things like, you essentially caused your mother's death, I'm poor, I'm a beggar, you're sucking the life blood out of me financially.
Paris, 31st of July, 1778. The Duc de Guines has already had for the last 4 months a concerto of mine for flute and harp for which he has not yet paid me. What annoys me most of all here is that these stupid Frenchmen seem to think that I am still 7 years old, because that was my age when they first saw me.
My dear son, unless you turn your present circumstances to profit and advantage to yourself, you will spend your life in ineffectiveness, remain unknown and poor, ruin yourself and me, and thus help nobody.
On his way home to Salzburg, Mozart visited the Weber family in order to see his sweetheart, Aloysia, for whom he had written a concert aria. Aloysia had secured a good singing position in Munich and was not interested in an out-of-work musician.
He had his great heartbreak with Aloysia Weber when he was 21, 22. And I think that was the decisive threshold to full maturity. That's why music he wrote from, say, 1779 has a new depth.
second movement, I think, is one of the most beautiful pieces that Mozart wrote. I think it's so much inside, and you can, when you play it and when you hear the orchestra play, you just feel this ache inside.
Exchequer to the Court Pay Office, Salzburg, 26th of February 1779. His Serene Highness has admitted and accepted the most submissively supplicating applicant, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, as His Highness's court organist, and most graciously granted him, like his predecessor, an annual salary of 450 gulden.
Why did Mozart write the pieces he wrote? I think the one thing we can be absolutely certain about is that Mozart almost never wrote a note just because he felt like it. When he wrote a Mass in Salzburg, it was because it was part of his job as an employee of the cathedral.
In the summer of 1780, Mozart was commissioned by the court of Munich to write the music for a new opera. He travelled there alone.
Our drive here was most uncomfortable. For 2 whole stages, I sat with my hands dug into the upholstery and my arse suspended in the air.
I wish you good luck. Your whole future depends on this. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my wedding day, which is now but a sad memory. A thing you will not understand. At least, not now.
Pray do not write any more melancholy letters to me, for I really need at the moment a cheerful spirit, a clear head, and an inclination to work, and one cannot have these when one is sad at heart. If I succeed in getting a good appointment here, then you must leave Salzburg immediately. My bedroom has 2 beds. These would do capitally for you and me.
No further progress has been made with the family portrait, the reason being that when the days were long and bright, your sister was ill. I'm sending you a pair of socks by the mail coach.
That is a story from Greek myth about a father who vows to sacrifice the first living being he meets if he will be rescued from the storm. The first person he meets is his own son, and so he's thrown into this dreadful quandary. It seems the emotional investment that Mozart may have made in this otherwise rather formal 18th century classical drama is that at the moment that he was writing it, he was really in the depths of his own rebellion against his father.
Seguirte il dietro meglio per te saria il non avermi veduto qui paventa 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 il vedermi. Acqua gelida ro, m'ingombra e senso, lo vedo appena. Che riconosco e a me te, rilascente non valere si revona, misero il che l'offese, e come mai quel sdegno meditai quelle minacce.
Mozart actually saw himself somehow in this character. He was also solving problem of son and father, and I think that this is the role where he gave the biggest part of himself.
Der Erzbischof von Salzburg war nach Wien gereist, weil sein Vater krank war. Und also wird Mozart nach Wien beordert. In Wien merkt aber Mozart natürlich sehr schnell, dass er eben als Domestike des Erzbischofs vorgeführt werden soll und fühlt sich schlecht behandelt.
Vienna, 17th of March 1781. Father, our party at lunch consists of 2 valets, the contrôleur, the confectioner, the 2 cooks, and my insignificant self. I never say a word.
To an extent which we would now find quite unacceptable and humiliating, he was regarded as a servant.
For Mozart, that really was intolerable. He's someone who's basically very chippy about his social position. He's also arrogant. His father has drummed into him that he is a genius. Again and again his father has said, remember, your gift is from God.
When I went into the Archbishop, he rushed full steam ahead without pausing for breath. I was the most dissolute fellow he knew. No one served him so badly as I did. He would have my salary stopped. My blood began to boil. I could no longer contain myself, and I said, "So your Grace is not satisfied with me?" "What? You dare to threaten me? You scoundrel! There is the door. I will have nothing more to do with such a miserable wretch." At last I said, "Nor I with you."
I think he made himself many enemies because he was unable to be silent sometimes when you have to be silent. Other composers, contemporaries of him, have had much more talent, you know, in saying the right things to the right people, and especially in knowing when they should not say certain things that they think.
I have not yet recovered from my astonishment, and shall never be able to do so, if you continue to think and to write as you do. You say that the only way to save my honour is to abandon my resolve. You say that I have never shown you any affection, and therefore ought now to show it for the first time. How can you say this? To please you, my most beloved father, I would sacrifice my happiness, my health, and my life, but my honour, that I prize. It is the heart that ennobles a man.
June 1781. Despite his father's pleas, Mozart decided to stay in Vienna. The Webers had also moved there. Mozart joined their household and became involved with Aloysia's younger sister, Constanze.
Father, people are gossiping. Because I am living with the Webers, therefore I am going to marry the daughter. There's been no talk of our being in love. They've skipped that stage. If ever there was a time when I thought less of getting married, it is most certainly now. God has not given me my talent that I might attach it to a wife and waste my youth in idleness. I am not in love with her. I fool about and have fun with her when time permits, which is only in the evening when I take supper at home. For in the morning I write in my room, and in the afternoon I'm rarely in the house, and that is all. If I had to marry all those with whom I have jested, I should have 200 wives at least.
Directors have a duty almost to enliven the theatrical element, the dramatic element, to make it relevant to the issues of audiences of today. And the wonderful thing about Mozart is that the issues that he was dealing with still live now.
It's about being human, which I think always is the most important theme when we come in contact with Mozart's pieces.
It's musical drama. That's what opera is. It's an attempt to dramatize, by means of words and music, particular themes and issues of human life.
Which makes it funny is that Constanze was the name of his future wife. And as Belmonte is in love with Constanze in the opera, one can think that Belmonte is Mozart himself. Key moments for Belmonte in Mozart's opera are when he's feeling the new, never before experienced emotions of love, and he's recognizing these new emotions and is totally unsure about himself. What are these emotions? Are they good for me? I feel scared. Oh, I feel good. He's traveling through these unknown emotions, and finally in the end he feels good and he decides he wants to follow this feeling of love.
Jeg tror, han har ladet sig inspirere utrolig meget af sit instinkt. Fordi at der er så meget kød og blod i alt, hvad han har skrevet.
Il est clair qu'on est à une période, en 1782, où Mozart est donc dans une période heureuse de sa vie. Je dirais qu'en relation avec la biographie de Mozart, c'est certainement le bonheur, la joie de vivre et une très grande légèreté, une très grande douceur et une très grande confiance dans les rapports humains, en tout cas dans l'amour qui existe, un amour très pur qui existe entre Belmonte et Constanze.
On the 4th of August, 1782, in St. Stephen's Cathedral, Vienna, Mozart, against his father's wishes, married Constanze.
Dear Father, despite your concerns, my dear Constanze is now my wife. No one was present at the wedding save her mother and her youngest sister, Sophie. When we had been joined together, both my wife and I began to weep. I wager you will rejoice in my happiness, when you get to know her?
Nachdem die beiden verheiratet waren, war es wahrscheinlich so, wie bei allen jung verheirateten Leuten. Sie suchen sich eine Wohnung. Die erste Wohnung ist schlecht und eng und unbequem, aber es spielt gar keine Rolle. Man lädt sich Leute ins Haus, Tanzveranstaltungen bei Mozart im Haus, die die ganze Nacht durchdauern.